Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Art of Creation Homestead. My name is Jason, if you're not familiar with us, but if you're watching this video, you probably are familiar with us, okay? Because it's Sunday, and we're here to do our Bible study / devotional for this week, okay? That's what we do every Sunday, and if you're not aware, this is just what we do, okay? I love it. I love talking about Jesus, and I love talking about the book of John, which is where we're at. We've been going through the book of John. We're in John chapter 11, okay? In John chapter 11, we just started it off last week. And it's talking about, this is the story of Lazarus, right? The man who was raised from the dead, that Jesus raised from the dead. We went through the first 10 verses last week where Jesus talked about walking by day, not by night. And so now the rest of this, we're going to try and cover the rest of the story of Lazarus. I'm not reading all the verses because that would be like 30-something, 40-something verses. I'm going to give you the highlights, and we're going to go through that. I'm going to talk about what we can glean from that, okay? Something maybe we can learn from that in the middle of this. Well, first thing I want to let you know is that there is no timeline, okay? There is no real timeline for exactly what had happened, okay? We don't know where Jesus was at. So Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus that their brother was sick, okay? They didn't say where he was at. They didn't say where Jesus was at. So there's no true timeline on how long it took these people to get there, okay? There's no timeline on where exactly Jesus was at, because like in verse 6, okay, it says that yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed there for 2 more days. So he stayed where he was 2 days. They didn't say where he was at. So then we're going to pick this up in verse 11, okay, because I went through 10 last week. In verse 11, he said, after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. So then Thomas, called Didymus, which by the way, that's doubting Thomas, okay, who later did not believe Jesus was really risen from the dead, all right, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Okay, so we've seen he stayed where he's at 2 days. When he got there, he'd been in the tomb for 4. So let's just say it's been a week. Right? It's been a week since Mary and Martha had sent word for Jesus, okay? A full week had went by. That's not exactly as quickly as they may have wanted him there. I mean, it took Jesus 4 days to get there after he decided to leave. It took him 2 days to decide to leave. It took him 4 days to actually get there. So who knows where he was at? Was he a mile or 2 down the road and just kind of meandered his way back? Who knows? We don't know what happened in that time. But we do know Jesus got there, right? We do know he got there, but in his time. So we're going to skip through a couple of verses, all right? Because I can't read them all, it's too much. So we're going to skip through a little bit. We're going to say in verse 20, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. But Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So there we see that Martha's like, hey, if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. That's what we're trying to prevent, right? We wanted these things done the way we wanted them done. But, okay, we know that God will give you whatever you ask. So Jesus said, your brother's going to rise again. But she didn't respond with the same faith that her first statement said. Because she said, I know God will give you whatever you ask. And she said, well, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So she wasn't even thinking about being raised from the dead right now. Her thought process was something else, I guess, because she says one thing at first, then when Jesus responds, she responds differently than what she started. So again, there may be a little confusion here, right? So then Jesus said, hey, look, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. Okay, so Jesus is like, hey, now look, okay, I am the resurrection and the life. So the resurrection is me. It's here right now for him, correct? That's what he's trying to tell her. And so then she went and got Mary, her sister. So Martha went to get Mary. Mary comes out. She says the same thing. She says the same. She fell at his feet and she said, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. That's verse 32, okay? So when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her weeping also, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And John 11:35, Jesus wept. Obviously shortest verse in the Bible, super popular verse, right? So it's John 11:35, Jesus wept. Now, let's be honest. This is what's going on. They want Jesus to come there and work in their time. And they don't understand now what's really going on. Thomas didn't understand what's going on. He didn't understand what Jesus was saying. He's like, hey, let's go there, die with him. And they thought, okay, well, he's sleeping. Well, first they said, okay, if he's sleeping, it's going to get better. So they didn't understand what Jesus was saying. Then when Jesus was like, hey, no, he's dead. Well, let's go so we can die with him. So they're still confused. When we get there, Martha is like, hey, if you'd been here, this wouldn't have happened, right? But then she's confused by his response. Or then Mary comes back, hey, if you'd been here, this wouldn't have happened. So obviously there's some things going on here that people don't understand what's about to happen, right? So Jesus has his own time frame, has his own thing he's doing. May not be exactly what they're thinking is going to happen, right? So then verse 36, then the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? So again, Jesus deeply moved, said, hey, okay, move the stone. Okay, came to the cave where Lazarus was laid, asked him to move the stone. So when they moved the stone, then Martha's like, wait a second. He's been there for a while. Verse 39, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. Sometimes the situation you're in might stink. All right, so let's get real. This is what we're getting at. God's got his own time, his own time frame. Sometimes things don't happen exactly the way we thought they would happen. I have been in the state of Ohio for 20 years. Just a year prior to that, nobody would have ever thought that this Blue Ridge boy was going to wind up in Ohio, right? Hey, I'm called to minister, I'm called to preach. I'm going to stay in a little small town, North Carolina, and pastor a church. That's just the natural way things go, right? I'm going to keep working at the grocery store. I'm going to go to this school. I'm going to pastor this church. I'm going to do this. I'm going to work my way up the ladder till I get to be a pastor, whatever. Things didn't exactly happen the way anybody, myself included, thought they were going to happen. So here I am 20 years later, I'm still in Ohio. Wasn't exactly on the itinerary for my life, for anybody, including myself. Okay, but God had a different idea. And I'm okay with that. We got to be okay with when God's timeline is different than your timeline, right? Sometimes things happen in a way that you didn't expect them to happen. And then it's a longer situation than what you believed it was going to be. And then there's a whole lot of confusion in the middle of it. Right in the middle of this whole situation, did not the disciples misunderstand Jesus? Did not Mary and Martha misunderstand Jesus? Did they not believe something different than what was going on? And then they're in this situation that they're in, a bad odor came out. So sometimes, exactly, the situation you're in might stink a little bit. But here's the glory of it all. That it's not about you. It's just not. Because Jesus said, I'm glad I wasn't there. Jesus said, I'm glad that I wasn't there to keep him from dying. Because now you're going to get to see my glory. Now you're going to get to see something amazing happen. Now there's going to be a testimony to my faithfulness, to my power, to my might. Now, because I'm doing things in my own way. Not me, Jesus. Okay, this is Jesus. Now because Jesus is doing things in his time frame, do we fully grasp that he can raise the dead? Right? And the situation did stink. Your situation might truly stink, okay? But it's for God's glory. So when you're in a situation that may be confusing for you, hey, God, it's not about getting me out of this. It's about, God, what do you need from me now? What do you want now? What are you doing now? Let me understand so that I can have this test. I want to know. I want to know because I want to have this testimony. I need to know what you're doing so that I can praise you in it. Okay, it's okay. It's okay to want to know what's going on, but you got to have but you got to look at your situation from a different perspective sometimes, and not about how can I get out, but what does God want in this time. Let's keep moving forward in the situation. Let's keep following Jesus in the situation so that I can give God glory, give God praise, have this testimony for what God did in my life, right? And look, John 11:35, Jesus wept. He cared. He cared about them hurting in the middle of this. He cared about their situation. He didn't want to see them mourning and weeping and wailing. He didn't want to see them hurt and confused. That wasn't his goal. Jesus wept. Jesus was deeply moved. Jesus was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. These were all things that were said right in the middle of this passage, right? He cares about what's going on. But he wants you to understand it's for his glory. And by the way, when he gets glory, you benefit. Okay? It ain't like he gets glory, you go about your own stinking life. No, you benefit big time. There's much blessing, there's much peace and happiness. There's a whole lot that happens when God gets glory in your situation. When God gets glory in your situation, things happen to go a little better for you. It's just the way it works. But then you see, by the end of this passage, it said, verse 41, so they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe you sent me. There we have it, for their benefit, right? When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with the strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did, put their faith in him. So you see, it's pretty good, right? Because they were able to see what God did. And it's for their benefit, so they could understand that who he is, right? So now, what benefit? Well, heck, now anytime you get in a situation, don't you think that you've seen what Jesus did here? Well, he's not going to do it. He can do it again, right? You've seen. Now you have a testimony. Now you can understand. Now you have an experience, by the way. Hey, I've been here before. I know Jesus is there. I know that he cares. And I know that in his timing, things will work out. And that there's got to be something for me here in the middle of this. Right? That's how we have to approach our situations. Because life's not easy. Because we're fallen people. It's not because God don't care. It's because we're fallen people. We're sinful people. We opened ourselves up to imperfections by making imperfect choices. Right? We're sinners. Saved by grace. But if we weren't sinners, it'd all be perfect. But we are. Okay, so we open ourselves up to this. God just said, I'm not going to leave you in your sin. I'm not going to leave you to face the detriments of your sin. Okay, I'm going to be here in the middle of it. It's going to be done in my time. I'm going to get glory. You're going to get benefit. And it's all going to be great in the end. But sometimes there is a bad odor. Right? When your situation is revealed, when you're in it. When that stone is pulled back and you see the product of your situation, a dead man laying there wrapped up, it might stink. There's a bad odor. But nonetheless, Jesus is still there. He gets in the middle of that stinkiness and calls you out of it. You may have the linen and the strips of linen and the cloth wrapped around you. You might still have the scars and the bruises from the situation you were in. But he's going to call you out of it. And as long as you follow him, you're out of it. And it's awesome. So it's going to be his time frame though. So let's learn from that. Okay? You might be confused in the middle of it. You might not understand what's going on. It's going to be done in His time. It's going to be awesome. And you're going to have testimony from it. And He's going to call you out of it. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any prayer requests or praise reports, please leave them in the comments below, or comments, just anything. We'd love to hear from you, pray for you. Okay, so thank y'all for watching. We do appreciate it. My name is Jason. This is Art of Creation Homestead. We love y'all. God bless you and goodbye.